The individual held a firearm in his grip, and it was aimed directly at my spouse. She didn't flinch, didn't even blink once. She simply elevated one eyebrow and declared, "You certain you want to proceed with that, officer?" He remained unaware at that moment. But that wasn't merely my wife positioned in the doorway. That was Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. And this fool had just executed the most catastrophic error of his pathetic little HOA existence. It commenced with the mailbox. A trivial little notification, bright orange and sloppily adhered to the front like it desired to be visible from outer space. Notice of non-compliance. Mailbox paint out of regulation hue. Correct within 72 hours to avoid citation. There wasn't even a contact number, merely a stamped emblem that read East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board, which sounded like something from a Hallmark production about HOA nightmares. We'd only been residing here 5 days. Still had unopened containers in the garage. The single thing I'd managed to accomplish was mow the grass and determine how to program the smart thermostat. I stared at that notification for an extended period, attempting to figure out whether this was some variety of stupid welcome prank or a genuine attempted intimidation. My wife, Rebecca, discovered me standing there with my coffee getting cold in my hand. "They don't approve of our mailbox," I muttered. She raised an eyebrow, skimmed the document, and then tilted her head just enough to make me laugh. "What's the regulation hue for?" "We just moved in," she inquired. I tossed the notice on the counter and forgot about it until the second one appeared 2 days afterward. This one was more severe. Vehicle violation. Driveway parking obstruction. Fine, $125. Repeat offenses may result in escalation. Escalation. Rebecca's SUV was parked dead center in our own driveway, not blocking the sidewalk, not facing the incorrect direction, just parked. Did we purchase into a gated community without realizing it? I asked, half joking, but Rebecca didn't respond. She was already retrieving the real estate documents on her laptop. She's like that quiet when she's suspicious. I leaned over her shoulder, sipping my now reheated coffee as she opened the deed and scrolled down to the fine print. There it was, in bold. This property is not subject to any active homeowners association. I let out a low whistle. So who the hell are the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board? Rebecca didn't reply, just bookmarked the section and saved the PDF with the new name. evidence_no_HOA.pdf. I still wasn't convinced it was anything severe. Maybe some overly motivated neighbor with a clipboard and excessive time. But things escalated the next morning. I was out front pruning the hedge, attempting to make our new place feel like home, when I noticed a man across the street taking pictures, not casual pictures. He was aiming a camera with a telephoto lens right at our garage. He had a badge on his chest and a radio clipped to his belt, but something about him looked off. His boots were too clean, his badge too shiny. His belt looked like it belonged at a costume shop. He noticed me watching and walked over, chest puffed like a dollar store deputy. "Afternoon," he said. "I'm Sergeant Daniels with the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board." I wiped sweat off my brow and offered a smile I didn't mean. "Didn't know we had a neighborhood safety board." He nodded, seriously, pulled a laminated card from his back pocket and held it up. It looked official for about a second until I spotted the expiration date. It was literally printed with valid through December 2021. It was 2025. "We handled compliance issues," he continued. "Community harmony. You've had a few violations already." I tilted my head. "So you're like an HOA." "We're better than that," he said. "More responsive, less red tape." Then he dropped the hammer. "We'll need to inspect your garage." I laughed. Actually laughed. "That's not happening," I said. "And unless you've got a warrant or a time machine to fix your expired badge, I suggest you move along." His eyes narrowed. "Non-cooperation will be noted." He pulled out a pad and started writing. I went inside, locked the door, and told Rebecca everything. She didn't laugh. Instead, she pulled up a county land use map cross-referenced it with the plat for East Summit, and confirmed what we were starting to suspect. This neighborhood safety board didn't exist in any legal capacity. No tax filings, no incorporation, no registered nonprofit. Just a name someone had slapped on a few printed citations and a couple of cheap badges. She called the county clerk. I called my buddy in code enforcement. Both confirmed the same thing. There was no HOA, no neighborhood watch group registered either. Whatever this was, it was completely rogue. This is fraud, I said. Flat-out impersonation of authority. It's also harassment, Rebecca added, opening a blank Word doc titled boardwatch_initial_report. They're not going to stop. When we compromised, I wanted to go to the sheriff's office and blow the whole thing up. Rebecca, ever the tactician, said we needed more. She had that glint in her. Either one I'd seen a dozen times back when she ran investigations into public corruption as the youngest sheriff in the counties. History. Let them think we're just a couple of suburban sheep, she said. We'll set the trap. You get the cameras. I'll start the log. By that night, we had 4 motion-activated cameras installed. One above the garage, one in the eaves overlooking the driveway, one peeking out from the mailbox post, and another hidden inside a decorative porch lantern. Rebecca printed out every violation we'd received and started marking dates and times on a whiteboard in the basement. By day 4, we caught him again. Daniels, walking up to our porch like he owned the place, snapping pictures of our trash bins, pulling out a tape measure to gauge the distance between our hedges and the curb. He looked around like he knew it was wrong, but not wrong enough to stop. Then he reached into his little black folder and left another orange slip on the door. This one read, Tina, final warning and compliant landscaping. Immediate correction required. That was it. I watched the footage that night 3 times. Slow motion, pause, enhance. His badge was made of aluminum. You could see the reflection of our porch light bouncing off the cheap engraving. Rebecca froze the frame and zoomed in on the radio on his belt. That's not a police issue, she whispered. It's a bail fiend programmable, unregistered. She leaned back in her chair and folded her arms. He's not just pretending to be part of an HOA. He's pretending to be law enforcement. I felt the hairs on my arms rise. That's a felony, Rebecca nodded. And he just committed it on our porch, on camera, while trespassing. We sent the footage to a secure drive, started backing up the logs. 2 days later, another board member showed up, a different man this time, trying to photograph our backyard through the slats in the fence. That was the moment. It came a pattern. Organized, coordinated. Rebecca started mapping incidents. Mailbox, vehicle, landscaping, trespass. Each time, the same language. The board. Neighborhood safety mandate. Violation. None of it legal, but all of it dressed up to look like it was. They're creating the illusion of authority, she said, banking on people not questioning it. They picked the wrong house, I said, staring at the paused image of Sergeant Daniels, walking toward our door with his plastic badge catching the light. Rebecca smiled, but it wasn't a happy smile. It was the same look I'd seen her give to a man in handcuffs once, right before he realized who had set him up to fail. He has no idea who I am, she said, and I think it's time we changed that. Came back on a Sunday night, a knock. Not a polite warning, but with traffic cones and clipboards and a megaphone, like we were squatters on our own lawn. I was halfway through trimming the hedges when I heard the crunch of gravel and turned to see a rusted gray SUV reverse across our driveway. 2 orange cones were tossed onto the concrete like they were staging a parade or sealing off a crime scene. Attention, homeowners. A voice boomed through an old megaphone that squealed every few seconds. This property is under active inspection by the East Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Please remain in your home until the assessment is complete. Assessment. Rebecca appeared at the screen door, wiping her hands with a dish towel and blinking like she'd heard a raccoon order breakfast through a drive-through speaker. "Are they serious?" she asked, but her tone was already sharpening. The SUV's doors opened in unison, and out stepped 3 men in faded tactical pants and polos that looked like they'd been bought in bulk from a militia-themed Etsy shop. And right in the center again was our old pal, Sergeant Daniels, holding a clipboard and flanked by 2 equally ridiculous deputies who looked like they'd failed out of mall security school. They wore earpieces, not plugged into anything, in utility belts stocked with what I later identified as a laser pointer, a walkie-talkie, and one had a multi-tool clipped like it was a badge of honor. I walked toward them calmly, phone in hand, already recording. "You're blocking my driveway," I said, voice steady, thumb tapping the record button. "We have a legal right to inspect non-compliant properties," Daniels announced, raising his clipboard like it was a warrant. "You violated 3 mandates: hedge, height, improper trash bin storage, and unauthorized signage." The signage was a tiny wooden welcome sign Rebecca had bought at a craft fair, hanging from a hook near the door. "There's no HOA here," I reminded him. "You're trespassing." That's when one of his backup goons stepped forward, placed a hand on his hip, and said, "Sir, I'm going to need to see your ID." I blinked. "For what?" "Failure to comply with community enforcement." The second man, a round-faced guy with a chest rig full of pins and a suspiciously unlabeled pepper spray canister, started filming us with his phone. "Subject appears agitated," he muttered into the mic that wasn't plugged in. "Non-cooperative male, possibly armed." I looked down at my pruning shears, then back at the camera. "Really?" Rebecca had stepped outside now, calm as the moon. She leaned against a porch railing like she had all the time in the world and watched, silent, as Daniel strutted forward and reached for his badge. And that's when she saw it. The design was wrong. The emblem etched into the center wasn't just a cheap hit, was a distorted, low-resolution version of our actual county sheriff's badge. The star had 6 points instead of 7. The eagle was reversed. The font a laughable mismatch. But it wasn't just that. They had tried to mimic her department. Not some fantasy community watch nonsense. No, they were impersonating her. Rebecca said nothing. Not yet. Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in calculation. She looked at Daniels like she was measuring him for a casket. I knew that expression. "You boys always walk onto private property, flashing that?" she asked sweetly. Daniels straightened up. "This badge gives me authority in this neighborhood." Rebecca gave a polite smile. Interesting. We let them dig their own graves. Okay. They took more pictures of our garage, measured the distance from our front porch to the curb like they were planning a bombing run, and handed us a paper with a printed fine schedule stapled to a pamphlet titled Community Code Book Assumit Edition. It had no author, no date, no citations, just bold headers and threats. That night, we added the video footage to the growing archive. "They tried to impersonate my badge," Rebecca said quietly. "That's not just trespassing anymore. That's a second-degree felony under county statute. Maybe more if they're using it to extort residents. And extortion is exactly what we found." Over the next week, neighbors started coming to us in private. A woman named Ellen, 2 doors down, whispered to us at the grocery store that she'd paid $150 for excessive decorative lighting around her porch. Jim from the cul-de-sac showed us a slip he'd received 4 prohibited yard flags after he hung up a football team banner. A family at the corner had their kids' trampoline tagged with a bright pink violation notice for non-approved recreational structures. These weren't just fake rules. They were turning the whole neighborhood into a grift. And most of the folks around Hero Door retired. Polite to a fault, they were afraid. Rebecca set up an encrypted Google Drive and started archiving every document, every photo, every interview. We blurred faces, kept it clean, but the names of the enforcers, we left those unredacted. Daniels, McCrae, Hollowell, every one of them wore a badge that mirrored the sheriff's office down to the stitching on their patches. Meanwhile, fake violation letters kept arriving. They mailed them now, probably worried about getting caught on our cameras again, and they were getting bolder. One letter accused us of willful obstruction of community harmony and cited a made-up statute, East Summit Code 14.3b, that didn't exist. Not on any legal books. We cross-referenced it. It was all fiction. That's when Rebecca said, "Time to go to the meeting." Every month, the self-appointed board held a public engagement session at the clubhouse down the hill in Old Rec Center, left over from the days when this area actually had an HOA in the early 2000s. It had been dissolved. We verified that, but they'd commandeered the space anyway. That night, we walked in calmly. A dozen folding chairs, a projector, a man at the front with a pointer and a fanny pack full of printed forms. Daniels sat on the far side, leaning against the wall, smug as a cat with a mouthful of feathers. The board president stood in the middle of the room, a tall, thin man with slick back hair and a voice that dripped with used car salesman grease. "Thank you all for coming," he announced. "Tonight, we will be voting on new vehicle restrictions, fence height adjustments, and monthly compliance evaluations." "Hold up," I said, raising a hand. "Who exactly gave you the authority to propose these?" The man blinked. "We're the Neighborhood Safety Board, sir." "Elected by whom?" Rebecca asked. The man bristled. "We don't need elections. We're volunteers maintaining the order of this community." "Order," Rebecca echoed, pulling a paper from her folder. "Then maybe you'd like to explain this." She held up a photo of the fake badge, Daniels's badge. The room shifted. The projector hummed. Silence. Daniel stood up. "We don't answer to civilians," he snapped. "We enforce the rules. If you've got a problem with that." "I do," Rebecca said. "A big one." Daniel stepped forward. The room was tense. People were leaning in, sensing something was about to snap. That's when he reached into his belt, pulled out what looked like a firearm. Later, we found out it was a pellet gun. But it didn't look fake. In that moment, Dan pointed it at my wife. "Back up," he said. "All of you." Meetings over. Chairs scraped back. People gasped. Someone screamed. But Rebecca didn't. She took one slow step forward and said calmly, "I'm Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. Put down the weapon, Daniels." Daniels's mouth fell open. The badge in his hand suddenly looked like a child's toy. "You're lying? Want to test that theory?" she asked. "My dispatch is on speed dial, and they're waiting for my check-in right now." "That gun in your hand just went from trespassing to armed criminal impersonation." He hesitated, blinked, shook, and then dropped it. It hit the floor with a sad clack, and the entire room exhaled. Rebecca didn't even look at it. She stepped past him, took the projector remote from the board president's hand, and switched off the screen. "This board is dissolved," she announced, "effective immediately." And nobody dared to disagree. You could have heard a pin drop. 1 second, Sergeant Daniels was standing there with a weapon aimed at my wife's chest. Chest puffed out like he was waiting for applause. In the next, he was the one holding his breath. Rebecca hadn't raised her voice. She didn't reach for anything. All she did was take one slow, deliberate step forward, level her gaze at him like she was ordering lunch, and say the words that turned the whole room inside out. "I'm Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. Put the weapon down." Time warped in that instant. Daniels blinked twice, mouth slightly open like he was trying to process English in real time. Could see it in its face, that flicker of dawning horror when someone realizes they've just made a catastrophic mistake. The pellet gun in his hand suddenly looked radioactive. His fingers twitched, his knees locked, and for a moment I genuinely thought he might run. But Rebecca didn't move. She didn't need to. She just calmly reached for her radio clipped to the inside of her coat. The entire time man pressed the button. Dispatch, this is Monroe. I'm at East Summit Community Center. Suspect impersonating law enforcement, possibly armed. Request immediate response. Advise all unit subject may be part of an organized impersonation ring. Copy. The radio crackled. Copy. Sheriff, units, en route, EDA, 5 minutes. From suspect in custody. Not yet, she replied evenly. Working on it. Daniels' hand opened like a rusty hinge. The gun dropped with a clatter onto the laminate tile, and someone in the back gasped, probably the only sound that had been made since she spoke. He stepped back, hands raised now, and for the first time all night, he looked small. Rebecca didn't gloat. She didn't yell. She didn't even touch him. She simply pointed at the folding chair he'd been occupying earlier and said, "Sit." And like a kicked dog, he did. The rest of the room came apart like wet cardboard. The board president stumbled backward into the projector screen. One of the deputies with the tactical belt slipped on his own clipboard, trying to inch toward the exit. People were standing now, whispering, recording on their phones. I caught one older man, maybe mid-70s, just shaking his head and mumbling. Knew something smelled fishy with those damn cones. The board's treasurer tried to act casual, like maybe this didn't concern her, like maybe she just happened to be here to watch a slideshow about hedge regulations. Rebecca wasn't having it. "Ma'am," she said, turning to her, "don't move. We'll be sorting all this out when backup arrives." "I didn't know," she stammered. "They just said we were allowed to help out. Volunteer patrols, they called it. I didn't know. You didn't know you were issuing printed fines with no legal standing or trespassing onto private property with fake badges?" Rebecca asked. Her voice was calm, but the words hit like hammers. Because ignorance doesn't make it legal. 10 minutes later, the room was crawling with real deputies. Black uniforms, flashing lights outside, tactical vests, and stern expressions. They came in like a hurricane of lawfulness, not with guns drawn yet, but with purpose. Daniels was immediately cuffed and led to the back of a cruiser. The pellet gun was tagged and bagged. One deputy took Rebecca's statement. Another began collecting IDs from everyone with a clipboard, vest, or badge. And yes, they all had badges not issued by any department, but printed in shiny plastic and clipped to their belts like Halloween costumes. The worst part? They really had gone Elin. They had laminated IDs, little booklets of community ordinances, and even a roster of residents with color-coded threat levels. I know this because one of the deputies, a young guy named Ortiz, held it up like a prize. "You gotta see this," he muttered to Rebecca. They were tracking people like they were gang units. One section labeled non-cooperative residents listed names, addresses, and infraction tallies. Ours had 9-hour crime spree, mailbox color, parked vehicle, unapproved flag, trash bin day violation, non-standard welcome sign, excessive lawn watering, hostile demeanor, that one had 2 stars, and finally, possible false ID claim spouse may be impersonating officer. Kid you not. They had accused Rebecca of impersonating herself. I saw her smirk as she read that part. "That's a new one," she said. "I've arrested bank managers who were more subtle." Deputy Rayner, who'd worked under Rebecca for 7 years, came over with his phone in hand. "Ma'am," he said, "one of the IDs we just scanned matches a known offender. Guy calling himself Board Security Chief, names Bryce McCrae. Did 3 years for impersonating a public official downstate." Rebecca didn't even blink. Add another charge to his file. Already did. They'd barely scratched the surface. As more statements rolled in, it became clear this wasn't just a few cranky neighbors playing dress-up. This was an organized racket. Fake citations were being mailed weekly. Residents were paying fines through a digital portal, that traced back to a PayPal account registered under ESNSB, ETH Summit Neighborhood Safety Board. Guess whose name was on the account? The board president's nephew, 25-year-old who lived in a nearby town and worked as a freelance graphic designer. And that wasn't all. One of the deputies flagged a van parked behind the community center. Inside, boxes of printed warning slips, traffic cones, violation packets, and a literal binder labeled escalation protocols. The instructions inside were so detailed it made my skin crawl. Stage 1, verbal notices. Stage 2, written citation. Stage 3, confrontation. Stage 4, tactical deterrent. Tactical deterrent. They had instructions for calmly but assertively displaying weaponry to encourage compliance. I nearly threw up. All this in a suburban neighborhood where the biggest actual crime in the past year had been a raccoon breaking into someone's pantry. Rebecca oversaw the intake from a table in the corner, flipping through statements and IDs with a face carved from stone. She wasn't smiling. This wasn't a win for her. This was cleanup. The worst kind, the betrayal love trust kind, because these people weren't just harassing us. They were extorting retirees, targeting single moms. One neighbor came forward and said they'd paid over $900 in made-up fines because they were afraid of being evicted. Another had received warnings about excessive gatherings from after hosting a birthday party for their 10-year-old. The safety board, this fake, ego-driven enforcement committee, had weaponized their image into fear, and they'd made real money doing it. "We don't know the full scope yet," Rebecca said. "Not yet." But as the deputies loaded boxes into cruisers and confiscated hard drives from the community center's little office, Rebecca turned to me and said, "They weren't pretending to be a homeowners association. They were pretending to be me." I didn't say anything. I just put my arm around her shoulder and squeezed. She wasn't shaken. Not really. She was angry. Angry like an earthquake that hadn't cracked the surface yet. And as the cruisers rolled out, taillights vanishing into the night, one thing became clear. East Summit would never be the same. The neighbors who'd once kept their heads down were now wide awake, and the paper-thin facade of the safety board had been peeled back to reveal something worse: a cartel of petty tyrants dressed up in shiny badges and khakis. The only good news. Now they were all on file, charged, booked, and very, very exposed. It started with a flyer. Nothing flashy, just a simple white sheet taped to every mailbox, every lamppost, and every community board from East Summit to Maple Ridge. Community Town Hall. Know Your Rights. Led by Sheriff Rebecca Monroe. No frilly fonts. No fake logos. No fabricated mandates. Just plain truth printed in bold black ink. The moment those flyers went up, you could feel the shift in the air. That cautious hush that had settled over our neighborhood for months, where people whispered about warnings and fines, where front doors stayed closed and blinds stayed drawn, started to lift. Slowly, almost hesitantly, folks came out of their houses. They gathered on sidewalks, leaned over fences, murmuring to each other. "Are you going to the town hall? Is it safe now? Did you hear? They really arrested that guy, the fake sergeant." The night of the meeting, the community center parking lot was full by 6:30. People parked along the curb, down the hill, on the next block over. Some walked in folding chairs. Others brought their kids. I spotted a dozen faces I recognized from earlier altercations. Folks who'd once dodged eye contact or declined to talk out of fear. Now they came in pairs and groups, some holding printed violations in manila envelopes, others with notebooks ready to take names. Rebecca entered the building last. She didn't sneak in through the side or wear civvies like she had during the fake board meetings. No, this time she came in full uniform, sheriff's badge polished, gun holstered, silver stars gleaming on her collar. And when she stepped up to that podium, the place didn't erupt in applause. It didn't need to. It went dead silent, like a courtroom, right before a verdict. She started with the basics. "My name is Sheriff Rebecca Monroe," she said, voice steady, carrying to every corner of the room. "I live here. I've been living here for 6 months. You've probably seen me walking my dog. You've probably also seen some men and women walking around this neighborhood in fake uniforms, issuing fake fines, threatening real consequences." There were nods, murmurs. Someone at the back whispered. Finally, Rebecca continued, "Let me be absolutely clear. There is no legally recognized HOA operating in East Summit. There is no neighborhood safety board, and there is no authority whatsoever behind the citations, inspections, or tactical enforcement that many of you have experienced over the past year." She stepped aside and motioned to the table beside her, where Deputy Ortiz had laid out the evidence. Photos, documents, a display board labeled the grift, how they did it, itemized fines, fake badge replicas, even one of the plastic vests with board enforcement printed across the chest in cracked vinyl. "This," Rebecca said, holding up a printed violation for non-standard porch decor, "was issued to an 84-year-old woman because she hung a wind chime that made too much noise. She was told if she didn't pay within 72 hours, her house would be subject to compliance lockout. That's not just cruel, it's illegal." There were gasps, real ones, not theatrical, not for effect. People weren't just learning about the con, they were realizing they'd been conned. Rebecca explained the charges next. How Sergeant Daniels, real name Gregory Dalton, was now facing felony impersonation, criminal trespass, attempted assault with a weapon, and fraud. How the board president, Leonard Brandt, Tay, had siphoned over $32,000 in fake fine revenue into personal accounts, and how investigators had uncovered plans to expand the operation to 3 neighboring communities. Using the same fake HOA blueprint, they were building an empire of fear, she said, and they were doing it door by door, one fake warning at a time. The crowd was silent, again, not out of fear this time, but anger, cold, steady, slow-burning anger. Rebecca let it settle before delivering the final piece. "Every person who paid a fine will receive restitution. Every victim who was threatened, harassed, or filmed without consent will be contacted by our office, and every neighbor who cooperates with this investigation will be protected under our witness coordination unit. This is not over. This is just beginning." A man near the front, Mr. Jennings, whose wife had cried when they were threatened with lien notices, stood and said, "Sheriff, what do we do if someone tries this again?" Rebecca didn't even blink. "You call me." After the town hall, people didn't just file out. They lingered. They talked. For the first time since we'd moved in, people were smiling at each other without suspicion. Rebecca stood outside for over an hour, shaking hands, listening to stories, taking down names. A teenage boy handed her the fake citation his family had received for unlicensed sports equipment. After they left a soccer net in the yard, she promised to make it right. A retired couple gave her the homemade HOA mandate. They were told to hang in their window under threat of escalation. "Don't throw it away," she told them. "We're building a case, and build it." She did. Within 2 weeks, every member of the so-called safety board had been served with official notices. 3 arrests were made. 5 more were hit with civil penalties. Even the guy who printed their fake badges, some out of town, Etsy seller who just thought it was for a costume party, was questioned. The East Summit domain name was seized by the county. The PayPal account was frozen. And that rec center, it now had a real community watch sign outside, courtesy of the sheriff's department, not run by vigilantes, but by neighbors, volunteers, people who asked first and never pointed anything at your face. As for Sergeant Daniels Dalton, his perp walk happened the following Friday morning. Right past our driveway, I was outside trimming the hedge when the unmarked car pulled up. He was in handcuffs, wearing the same vest he'd worn the first time we met, now dirty and torn. I didn't say a word, just watched as 2 deputies led him down the sidewalk, past our mailbox, past the spot where he once left a violation taped with red duct tape that read, "Final warning, landscape non-compliance." That same sign, Rebecca had it framed, hung it in her office behind her desk. Above it, in bold hand-stenciled letters, "Nice try." People laughed when they saw it. Visitors, reporters, deputies. It became a local legend. Quiet reminder that the best revenge doesn't have to be loud. It just has to last. Some neighbors still keep their porch lights on a little later now. Others leave their blinds half open instead of shut tight. A few houses even got together and threw a block party on the anniversary of the takedown. They called it Freedom from Fines Friday. Rebecca brought cookies. I brought a Bluetooth speaker and played AC/DC. No violations were issued. Just laughter. Rebecca still gets called the Sheriff of Suburbia by the kids. And truth be told, I think she likes it. But it's more than a nickname. It's a message that no matter how quiet a neighborhood seems, there's always someone watching. Someone keeping score. And if you're dumb enough to point a weapon at the sheriff in her own driveway, well, you'd better be ready to see yourself hanging on her office wall under 2 little words that say it all. Nice try.